This one is going to be a doozy. This one is going to be dangerous. And all I'm going to do is show you video of what they themselves said. But it's still going to be dangerous. All right, this is a scary one, but you need to hear it. You need to see it. It's important and it's true. So I'm going to show you some videos. I encourage you to help me get the word out on this. This is going to be one where I don't give so much opinions or conjecture as I do just show you. It's hot, super hot. Here's what we're going to do. I want to give you time to invite people to see this, tag people, whatever, share it, like it, please. We got to get the word out on this. I'm going to thank some sponsors first, and then I'm going to play some very appropriate campaign ads in the middle. So let's thank our sponsors first, and then buckle up.
Strong, effective leadership. 3 words that could mean the difference between prison and your freedom. I'm Al Saulene, your Panama City Beach lawyer. 850-215-0628.
You want to look good? You want to feel good? Little John's Big and Tall is where it's at. Right across the street from Sky's Pizza Pie, 5700 North Davis Highway. You can find out more online at littlejohnsbigandtall.com. He's also a member of the iTex trading community, where your iTex dollars are welcome. Don't let back pain and neck pain get you down. Find relief at Brown Chiropractic Center on St. Andrews Boulevard in Panama City. Dr. Sherry Brown helps people heal naturally with chiropractic adjustments and deep tissue massage. Call 769-3777.
All right, let's get right to it. So hopefully you know, basically, a couple of years ago, a local attorney by the name of Hoot Crawford, who was representing a 16-year-old teenage girl who was a victim of sexual assault, but not in the way that you might think. She had gotten in her brother had kind of picked a fight with her. He was 18. She was 16 a couple of years ago in another state. She was going through a hard time. She had a therapist, and she had told her therapist some things, like when they were little kids, living in another state when they were very little, that he had touched her brother. She later said that these things weren't true. She was having an emotional breakdown. She sure was. She ended up getting Baker acted. And after she was Baker acted. But the reason she is a victim is because her biological father went to prison for sexually assaulting her when she was a little girl. So she was going through a tough time at 16. I'm glad to report she's 18 now and doing a lot better. As a matter of fact, you saw her testify last week as a young lady in front of Judge Kelvin C. Wells and said the Children's Advocacy Center and the authorities and the sheriff's office, geez, they're the ones that traumatized me, not Hoot Crawford. He was my attorney. And my right to an attorney was violated. And my attorney-client privilege was used as evidence against him, by the way. And top prosecutor, State Attorney Larry Basford, continues to misrepresent what the recording was. Hoot Crawford recorded their conversations. Imagine. You know what the young lady told the judge last week? I don't think I'll ever trust attorney-client privilege again. That's what they've done. She already had trust issues, And that's what the Children's Advocacy Center, Bay County's Venus flytrap for girls. The Children's Advocacy Center is a Venus flytrap. It is not there to advocate for them. It is some kids who are autistic are told they have to go in a room alone, room 101, from 1984 and say things while law enforcement men like Investigator Fondren and Detective Jake Roberts are out there watching through the window. What is she saying now? Boy, she's kind of, Venus Flytrap, Children's Advocacy Center. Makes me so angry. Girl's attorney, she's a Marsy's Law victim. Marsy's Law is a constitutional amendment in Florida that was enacted in 2019. And it allows victims to have a lawyer every step of the way. But Sheriff Tommy Ford and State Attorney Larry Basford, both on the board of directors for the Children's Advocacy Center, along with Lieutenant Mathis and the COO, Brent Patrick, who happened to be working as a child advocate that day, but never talked to the children. It was a setup. And she had her rights violated in every damn way. And Larry Basford is campaigning right now, vote for me for top prosecutor because I protect this little girl. He calls her a little girl. She's a young lady. And she's not happy with you. And she's not happy with all of the authorities who violated her rights and arrested her attorney on bullshit charges. And got a crooked judge, Kelvin C. Wells, to come here and say, remember the charges, right? They said that her attorney, while they were in the Children's Advocacy Center, surrounded by law enforcement with her parents, that she was in imminent danger and being neglected. And the judge, Joe Grammer, upheld them taking her into custody because she wanted to have her attorney. And Judge Joe Grammer upheld it because he said the neglect was that her parents hired her an attorney. They said, but your brother is a suspect and a terrible threat. But then I'm going to show you this first. But then in the actual courtroom at trial, the sheriff's office, Lieutenant Mathis, who's the one who did all this, he actually said under oath that the brother was not a threat. The whole thing was a lie. The state never had lawful custody of her. And they have out of context taken the attorney-client privilege out of context, leaving out sentences. And Judge Wells instructed the jury to convict Hoot Crawford as long as he heard the DCF agent say, we're taking her under custody. That was it. So Larry Basford, Sheriff Ford, and Judge Wells think that they're going to establish that they can just take your kid from you and you're not allowed to question whether it was a lawful taking. It's not going to stand. And more people need to stick up for this person and for Hoot Crawford. Watch. You think I'm joking that the brother was never a threat? Watch this.
Your concern was that he was going to somehow do something, right?
No, sir. Okay, so just let the girl be molested, let her move on with her life, right? Right?
You had no concern he was going to do anything.
I can't predict the future, Mr. Pumphrey. I can't say what I was going to do. I can say that my concern was for her mental health. My concern was for her emotional health. My concern was for that girl. Okay, so just let the girl be molested, let her move on with her life.
And your concern for that girl involved potentially doing something to her, isn't that correct?
The fact that he was back in the area, from what I was told, and that's what led to her having to go get evaluated. Yes.
Okay, so he's kind of the root of the issue.
By the way, and you're not going to believe me. I'm not going to show you this video tonight, but the judge right there, Kelvin C. Wells, is scrolling Facebook One person testified for 30 minutes, and for 19 of those 30 minutes, we have him on courtroom video scrolling Facebook and answering objections while he's using his thumb to scroll his phone. He was on Facebook, and he was also texting like a mug. Who was he texting? Who was telling him what to say and do? What favor? We already know what favor he wanted. All right, but yeah, he's scrolling through Facebook. He especially did it when the prosecutors were asking the questions. But watch.
One of them.
Okay. And so as a law enforcement officer, when you have a suspect, what do you do as far as that suspect? Do you identify them and locate where they are?
Was not a suspect in the criminal act that occurred in Bay County.
Oh,
both know this.
now remember that, okay? Because you're about to see State Attorney Larry Basford in campaign debates say that Hoot Crawford was not really representing her. He was trying to protect the person who was hurting her. Nobody was hurting her except for them. Watch. Don't believe me, just watch.
An end around to try to keep her brother from being charged. That's all it is.
So you weren't worried about potentially committing a criminal?
I worry about a lot of people potentially committing criminal acts. It doesn't mean that I can take action until they do. You and I both know this is an end around to try to keep her brother from being charged. Unfortunately, this is a reactionary business.
Well, understanding that, but you have an identifiable suspect, right?
Correct.
You're worried that he may harm in the future, specifically molest.
I'm worried that his presence is causing issues for her. That's my concern.
All right. So if that is enough to her brother was 18, lived in another state, came to visit the family. They were saying that you heard it, that the brother was going to molest her, but he testified that that was not so. Whole thing was a ruse. Okay. So you heard him at the end that his presence was causing her to be mentally unstable or whatever it is. They say that's enough to take your kids. That's Sheriff Ford. Sheriff Ford's supervisor of investigators. By the way, in a couple of weeks, you're going to be voting. Do you want Sheriff Ford back? Because you have an alternative. There hasn't been a vote for sheriff in Bay County since 2004. There hasn't been a vote. This is the first time a sheriff has been challenged. And I want to share with you this paid political ad. This is somebody who retired as a captain from the sheriff's office last year and wants to bring integrity to the sheriff's office.
You lead by example. You are beyond reproach with your character, with your work ethic, and how you deal with situations. Deputies are going to make mistakes, but the community needs to know that they feel comfortable enough where they can come forward with a concern, listen to them, figure out the problem. If there is a problem, you correct it and you fix it.
Vote Andy Hussar for sheriff on or before August 20th. All right, let's take a look at what the top prosecutor, Larry Basford, has been saying in the campaign debates. And he's running against Eric Garman. The state attorney is the top prosecutor in 6 counties: Washington, Calhoun, Holmes, Gulf, Bay, and I always forget one, Jackson. So if you live in any of those counties, you can vote for Eric Garman. Watch Eric Garman debate old Larry Basford here. Now, Larry Basford, see, Hoot Crawford was going to run for state attorney. That might explain, maybe, why Larry Basford was the one who authorized the arrest of Hoot Crawford. This, what I'm going to show you first, occurred on WMBB's candidate debate on July 23rd. And at this point, Hoot Crawford had not been sentenced yet. which means what? It means, this is why I say he crossed the line. It means it was still an open case. A criminal case is not closed at the conviction. It's closed at sentencing. The debate you are going to watch, or parts of it that I'm going to show you, State Attorney Larry Basford, top prosecutor, who authorized the arrest of Hoot Crawford on May 6th of 2022. The case is still open when he says what you're going to see now. I mean, is this a bar complaint? I don't know. Is this a bar complaint? It's got to be something. He can't do this, but he did.
But as far as no direct examples of conflict, in the Hoot Crawford case, okay, when the Bay County Sheriff's Office had Mr. Crawford pulled over, deposition, or for those.
So just so you know, Hoot Crawford was the attorney for the young lady. The sheriff's office, Sheriff Ford and them, said you got to come to the Venus flytrap of Bay County for kids called the Children's Advocacy Center. So they had already scared the hell out of this girl, especially Investigator Fondren, who was like a Cape Fear villain chasing her around, the 16-year-old girl. So her family gets her an attorney to go with her to the Venus flytrap of Bay County Children's Advocacy Center to be with her at a voluntary interview. Voluntary. So her parents, her mom and her loving adoptive father, and her Marcy's law attorney, Hoot Crawford, go. And when they get there, the sheriff's office says, you're not allowed. You have to go in room 101 alone. And she said, I really, she didn't want to talk without her attorney by her side. But policy is they got to get these girls alone. But see, policy doesn't supersede the Constitution, your right to an attorney, which they stripped from her and interrogated her over and over and over after they arrested Hoot Crawford. Wait till you hear in just a few minutes. Larry Basford says last night at the Moms for Liberty forum for candidates, the top prosecutor said, yeah, you're not going to have another attorney trying that again at the Children's Advocacy Center. He says that. He says that. You're going to see it.
Who don't know what that is, an interview under oath. The lieutenant from the sheriff's office called the state attorney's office.
So I'm sorry. So Hoot Crawford, they were free to leave after all hell broke loose at what you saw a minute ago at the Children's Advocacy Center. They said, well, we're taking her into custody. The sheriff's office called their friends at DCF. DCF immediately said, we're taking her. Well, you can't just do it like that. There has to be what's called a pickup order from a judge. So Hoot Crawford said, look, I'm going to take my client. He's an officer of the court. I'm going to take her just a few blocks away to my office. We'll be at my office, officer of the court. And if you get a quarter, if a judge signs off on this, I'll hand her over to you. That's where we'll be. And when they drove off, Lieutenant Mathis and Investigator Fondren gave chase and pulled them over. And they kept them in the car for more than an hour before they could go a block to his office. They kept him on the side of the road until a judge signed it. Because they lied to the judge that she was in imminent danger with her attorney and her parents at the safe space. So while they're on the side of the road, Lieutenant Mathis calls the state attorney, top prosecutor Larry Basford. And now we learned that Larry Basford was in the room not only with his number 2 and number 3 prosecutors, but also with the former state attorney, Glenn Hess. We didn't know that before. Nobody said that under oath, but Basford says Hess was there as well. All right, so that's what Eric's talking about here. This is Eric Garman. He says, look, they called you and you said, yeah, go ahead and arrest your political rival.
Office. And in that deposition, they said that they spoke to Mr. Basford, who said, yes, go ahead and make that arrest. Now, all of the judges in the circuit conflicted. If what the court documents say are true, then there's an even larger issue that he gave the command to arrest or at least the okay, there's no way that that does not rise to the level of a conflict.
If I could respond to that, Tom. First of all, yes, we do supervise our misdemeanor attorneys, and there again goes the lack of experience in this. When someone comes to work at the state attorney's office, they are giving a tremendous amount of discretion, but they are supervised by an attorney who has 30 years of experience, and because his job is to lead and mentor those people to make sure they're using that discretion wisely. In regard,
Remember, he was a board of director, as was Sheriff Ford, as was Lieutenant Mathis of the Children's Advocacy Center when all of this happened.
to the Hoot Crawford case,
It's an open case at this point. The sentencing had not occurred. He is talking about an open case.
who was he really representing? Was he representing the victim, the child victim in the case, or was he really representing the person who was accused of committing the crime against the victim? In this case, law enforcement and the Department of Children and Family Services, whenever they receive a report,
He was on the board, as was the law enforcement officer. Okay. Now remember, the girl had made previously, while she was in an emotional breakdown for which she got Baker acted, she made statements about her brother that she later said were not true. Those statements occurred on a family vacation, okay, in Utah. So in other words, even if the brother had said what she said at the time, it would have been out of jurisdiction, and that was established. So Basford is now making another statement that law enforcement had an absolute duty. They all said it was out of their jurisdiction, even if it did happen. And I've already established here that the sheriff's office said that the brother was not a threat. But watch Basford in an open case.
report that a child has been abused, they have an absolute duty to investigate that case. And that's what they did in this case. During their investigation, they made a determination that this child victim needed to be taken into protective custody to prevent further exposure to the person who had abused her and to prevent any harm. Now, law enforcement and the Department of Children.
He's not only making statements in an open case because Hoot had not been sentenced at this point, he is making false statements.
Family Services use extreme caution when investigating these cases, because if they don't, there could be more harm or more abuse to a victim. In this case, the attorney interfered with the investigation.
Did you hear that? They said that that he had interfered with an investigation after authorizing the arrest on the phone, after he said arrest Hoot Crawford to the sheriff's office. Later on, Larry Basford added a charge to his political rival who was going to run for state attorney against him. It was going to be Hoot Crawford rather than Eric Garman. He added a charge, tampering with a victim. He was the attorney. So attorneys at a voluntary interview. And by the way, that is a specific crime, okay? In other words, the way the law works, not the way old Judge Wells and Larry Basford work, but the way the law works is in order to tamper with a victim or a witness, it has to be a named person. They never, ever named a person. Now, presumably, it was his own client, but they never, ever, ever named a person. It's a specific intent crime. You cannot, by right. Now, by these guys, they'll do anything to you to interfere with an election. But you cannot be found, you cannot be prosecuted, arrested, or convicted, which all happened. If they say that if they charge you with tampering with a victim, but they don't name anybody. And the judge did not allow Hoot Crawford to say that to the jury. And Larry Basford is the one who pushed this forward.
Of this child abuse case, he was arrested. He was tried by.
Was not a child abuse case. Not only is he, even if he was making correct statements, it would be really improper, a conflict, perhaps a bar complaint, because the case is still open. But everything he's saying is false.
By a jury and convicted for interfering.
One of the juries, by the way, made a false statement. What do they call it? Is a significant false statement, material false statement. And the judge had to grant Crawford, after the conviction, the right to interview this juror who lied to get on the jury. And then this guy, Larry Basford, he made some motion after the judge had to rule, yeah, you get to do that, doggone it, that there was not a signature or something on a piece of paper. I don't remember what it was, but it's all being appealed. But it's okay to lie in jury selection, according to Larry Basford.
With the taken into custody, as well as tampering a witness. Now, as far as a conflict of interest, I don't see where there was a conflict of interest. He was a defense attorney. In the past, we have prosecuted attorneys who committed crimes, and we were not going to let the fact that he was an attorney merely cause a conflict of interest with our office.
Think about what he just said. And this is something he keeps saying in all the debates. Look at him. We weren't going to allow, just because he's an attorney, at a voluntary interview at the Venus Flytrap Children's Advocacy Center, we were not going to allow him, just because he's an attorney representing this girl, to, advise her what to say and what not to say. That's what attorneys do. She was the victim, not the defendant. She was the victim. There was no defendant. There wasn't even a real suspect. This whole thing was made up. Where are you, authorities who oversee this? FBI. This is interfering with an election again by these same guys. These are federal civil rights violations. And you know this. I know you know. Homeland Security investigations. HSI. Where you at? I know where you're at, but
Do you agree, disagree with that, Mr. Carmen?
Well, Mr. Basford talks about deflection. That was a masterclass. In the court documents, it says that the sheriff's office called Mr. Basford, not Mr. Basford's office. And Mr. Basford said, yes, arrest him. If you give the order or the authorization to arrest, there is nothing. I don't care what a jury does later. I don't care what the facts are. You yourself are conflicted. Now, if those facts end up coming before a jury or a prosecutor that doesn't have a conflict of interest, be that what it may, that's fine. But when you yourself say, yes, go ahead and arrest, you have an absolute conflict.
There you go. Could I respond to that, Tom?
Yeah, well, but I want to ask you a question. What was that conversation like? I mean, he's just court records of that.
Yes.
Was the court records accurate? Is that how the conversation?
Yes. The officers called us up and briefed us on the situation. Okay. I was in a meeting with Mr. Mark Graham, my Bay County Chief Assistant, as well as Peter Overstreet, who is our major crimes leader. And I believe Mr. Hess was in the office that day preparing.
We didn't know that. Nobody had mentioned that in the trial, that the former state attorney, Glenn Hess, was there. Who arrested, by the way, his political rival, Greg Wilson. And Greg Wilson was going to run against Basford, and they took out Greg Wilson the same way they took out Hoot Crawford. This is so big. But what I'm stuck on, quite frankly, it's bad enough what they did to the attorney, Hoot Crawford. But they violated this girl's attorney-client privilege. They also violated her right to an attorney by arresting him and then interrogating her over and over and over again. But nobody knew during the trial. This just came out afterward because Larry Basford's talking about an open case. The last state attorney, Glenn Hess, was there with you guys.
Another case. We listened to what the officer said, and it was the consensus. And I ultimately made the decision that, yes, we were going to prosecute, we were going to authorize the arrest because we were not going to let an attorney do something with a child that we would not allow a parent of a child to do.
I want you to let that sink in. An attorney is an officer of the court. An attorney is there to stand between you and the authorities, especially at a voluntary interview where the authorities are insisting you go into a room alone and answer their questions that are in bad faith anyway, because now we know they never thought the brother was a threat. You saw that in testimony. I showed you that. He said, we will not allow an attorney to do what we won't allow a parent to do. In other words, you are violating the attorney's right to represent his client, and you are violating her right to have an attorney. This is absolutely insane. He keeps saying this over and over in the debates. Listen to this and let it sink in, please.
Listen to what the officer said, and it was the consensus. And I ultimately made the decision that, yes, we were going to prosecute, we were going to authorize the arrest because we were not going to let an attorney do something with a child that we would not allow a parent of a child to do.
That's insane.
Again, this shows the inexperience of my opponent over there when he says anytime that I authorize an arrest that we should conflict out of cases. Many times when officers are investigating complex cases, whether they're white collar crime cases or homicide cases, for instance, these cases where drug dealers are selling or delivering drugs.
He thinks he's going to deflect, but it's not going to happen. Not with Eric Garman.
That cause overdose deaths, and then we're looking at prosecuting those for manslaughter or murder. We consult and advise law enforcement when they have sufficient evidence to go forward to make an arrest. Under the scenario or hypothetical that he gives, in all of those cases, I have a conflict. That's just not the way things work in the state of Florida in this office. It's not the way they work in any prosecutor's office in the United States.
Mr. Garman, anything more on this before we put this one to bed?
Sure. The difference between the drug dealers, the white collar criminals, and all that is they're not your declared and openly announced political opponent. Okay. This is not just a normal person. And what I would say is, again, we're trying to do integrity of trials. I am not, as my opponent tries to paint it, saying that he should have been arrested or not. I'm saying that if you make that call, that's fine to advise law enforcement. That's part of your job. But when it's a known political opponent, let someone else prosecute that case.
Tom, again.
Well, maybe Larry Basford didn't know. Maybe he didn't know.
That's just fake news. That's false. Okay. The only political opponents.
Watch this Freudian slip. Okay. So in 2017, Glenn Hess was the state attorney and Basford was his number two. Basford was going to run in 2020, which he did. Greg Wilson, who used to be the assistant state attorney, was going to run against Basford in 2020. But Glenn Hess had had Greg Wilson arrested. So the Freudian slip here is this. Larry Basford is going to say the only people that were going to run against me that were arrested was that I ever ran against, was Wes Hatcher. The only people I ever ran against was Wes Hatcher. They arrested Greg Wilson, so he couldn't run, just like Hoot Crawford. Watch this Freudian slip.
That I've had as state attorney have been has been Wes Hatcher back in
Look at Tom
2020.
Lewis's face. He knows.
was not arrested or prosecuted. And the man sitting across from me, and to my knowledge, he's never been arrested or prosecuted.
You feel like he's going to say yet. Look, Tom Lewis even knows. Tom Lewis is like, oh, you almost said Greg Wilson.
I never knew that Mr. Crawford had
okay.
any ambitions
Oh.
of running for state attorney
There it is.
until after he was arrested.
Whoa! You knew after you arrested him? You prosecuted him for 2 years. Holy Nikes! So he did know. And he added a charge, tampering with a victim. He just admitted that he knew. After the arrest, well, that's when you have it. You're the prosecutor. That's when you're supposed to recuse yourself. And he didn't. He just piled on.
And I'm not going to let an attorney or anyone else create a conflict or try to create a conflict when one actually doesn't exist.
Okay. Now we're going to transition to what happened last night after Hoot Crawford was actually sentenced. What that man, Larry Basford, said last night at the Moms for Liberty. Oops, hold on. What he said last night at Moms for Liberty is only about 3 minutes long, but you're absolutely not going to believe it. Another paid political ad by Eric Garman, who, if you want integrity in the prosecutor's office, you just saw. That's who we need to elect.
After Mr. Basford got elected, he employed former state attorney Hess, paid him in the range, and you can correct me, somewhere around $145,000 a year to have one case, which he lost at least twice. I do not believe that's a good steward of our money.
That was a good effort and a good expenditure of money, and he didn't make anywhere close to $140,000. I think.
So what do you think? Is Eric Garman a good candidate? Should we elect Eric Garman in 2 weeks? He doesn't have all the signs. He doesn't have all the commercials. He doesn't have all the gigantic support by the local cabal. Hey, also might as well thank right now the Unknown Patriot for your support that allows me to do this as another sponsor of the show. Some people don't want to put their names on it because, you know, guys like Larry Basford will come and tip them over. You know, Sheriff Ford, Larry Basford. So that's the Unknown Patriot supporting the show. And also a big thank you to those of you who throw a tip in the tip jar as little as $5 a month. Crowdfunding is the only way I'm able to do this. Thank you for those of you who donate to my efforts to tell you the truth. It is very dangerous to tell you the truth. What did Orwell say? In a world of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. You saw they surrounded my home as soon as they got mad at me, as soon as I found out that they'd been lying. Anyway, thank you so much. Being a patron is anonymous. It's easy, and you can quit at any time at patreon.com/Bernie Thompson. All right. You ready for this? This is it. Now we're going to watch what happened last night when the very, very brave citizen journalist from the Beacon of Bay County, if you're not following them on Facebook, you're missing out, the Beacon of Bay County. I wouldn't have asked this question. I'm telling you right now, I would not have done it. For one thing, believe it or not, those of you who know me know. Those of you who don't know me and hate me, you think I love it. I don't. I do not like all of this conflict. I do not like standing in front of the council. What do I always say? I feel like a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs every time I'm there. But I have to. But I would not have asked this question in this setting. For one thing, I'm afraid of Larry Basford, and I'm afraid of Sheriff Tommy Ford. And retired Major Jimmy Stanford, who is going to come back if he's reelected as the number 2. I think. I bet you. Want to bet? I'm afraid of them. They follow me, and I'm recording them now. So when I drive, I'm going to record them every time I drive by them. Every time I turn around and follow them back, and they take off down a side road. I'm recording everything now, and my lawsuit is being filed now. Like the 6-month wait's over, so I have to. I wouldn't have done this though. I'm not that brave, but Jody Moore is. The Beacon of Bay County on Facebook deserves a follow. Here we go. Oh my God. Now, yesterday the case was closed. So Basford doesn't have that issue. But in your opinion, should a prosecutor have the proper temperament? Or should a prosecutor who's on the board of directors with the sheriff at the Venus flytrap for kids that they call the Children's Advocacy Center, shouldn't they not get angry?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hoot Crawford was recently sentenced.
Yes, ma'am.
And he was at one time considering running for state attorney, and I know this has been discussed. So he got 3 years of probation, and I guess he has to have a mental exam. So there were a lot of resources expended on that case. So what do you think about the case? Do you think that was proper? Do you think it was a proper punishment? Do you think that's keeping the streets safe to have him be on probation and no longer be able to practice?
I think number one, this talk about him running for office for state attorney, that didn't come up until months after he had been arrested. Okay. And I was not.
Whoa. Ooh. What? Was I talking and nobody could hear me? Shoot. I hope that's not so. Okay, it doesn't look like it. That didn't come up till months after the trial lasted. I mean, the prosecution lasted 2 years, Larry. So Larry Basford admits that he knew that Hoot Crawford was going to run against him. And they added another charge. He did. Larry Basford added a charge to the prosecution, tampering with a victim, but never named anybody. Never named anybody. It's a specific intent crime. There has to be a name. There wasn't a name. But of course, the bum Judge Wells allowed it. Okay, so here we go. He's going to say some of I'm going to let this run, okay? I'm not going to interrupt anymore. But I want you to catch when he says near the end, there won't be another attorney who comes in there and tries to get in our way at the Children's Advocacy Center, thinking they can represent a kid, thinking somebody has the right to an attorney. We're going to treat them just like a regular person. An attorney's no different than a regular person. Listen to this.
This talk about him running for office for state attorney, that didn't come up until months after he had been arrested. Okay. And I was not going to let an attorney create a conflict when no conflict actually existed. Do I think it was worth prosecuting someone that was interfering with law enforcement and the Department of Children and Family Services from conducting an investigation to make sure this child was not going to be abused again, or whatever had caused this child to contemplate committing suicide, to make sure that was fairly investigated? Yes.
Okay. Now remember, because he just added that, she was Baker acted when she had an emotional breakdown. She was 16. By the way, again, I'm happy to report she's a young lady now. She's a young adult. They act like she's, 9. She's a young adult. And she went up there and testified in front of the judge. She's a great young lady. And these are the people who traumatized her. She herself told the judge that last week. Larry, you guys traumatized her. All this histrionics. Histrionics. Oh, she was Baker acted, but a doctor evaluated her, a doctor. And she was discharged at the minimum time. 3 days later, her mom picks her up. Her mom picks her up from the behavioral hospital. And these mothers, these so-and-sos are blowing mom's phone up on the drive home. They were monitoring them, surveilling them. They knew exactly when the girl gets let out because the doctor said, you're okay. Larry Basford was not going to stop her from hurting herself. You were the one traumatizing her. A doctor already evaluated her. It's not your job. He's just making all kinds of stuff up. And then by the time they got home, after being blown up on the phone, there was a deputy at the front door. And then a few minutes later, Investigator Fondren was banging on the door, yelling at the mom, threatening to take all of her children away unless she comes and talks to them alone. That's why they got a Marcy's Law attorney for her. It was a voluntary interview. They were scared to death. She needed an attorney. But Larry Basford said, just because you're an attorney, we're not going to treat you any different. Watch. He says there won't be another attorney that tries this again. Watch.
Attorneys, if they violate the laws, then as long as I'm in the state attorney's office, they will be prosecuted just like the average citizen. Just because you are an attorney, that doesn't give you a free pass to violate the law, man. And yes, I think it was a great expenditure of money because I don't think any other attorney will interfere with the.
Should a state attorney be, is this a good temperament? He said, no, I don't think anybody else is going to interfere with the Children's Advocacy Center where he and Sheriff Ford sit on the board.
It was a great expenditure of money because I don't think any other attorney will interfere with the investigation of Department of Children and Family Services or with law enforcement when they are investigating these child abuse cases.
Well, I have a question then. So how is it interference when he was her lawyer?
I'll tell you how.
Did she not have the right to have legal counsel?
She certainly did. But just like the evidence that showed at trial, when that young.
All right. So look at him. Look at him lying. If she sure did, State Attorney Basford, why did you arrest her attorney, snatch her, take her back to the Children's Advocacy Center, where she was put in the room alone without an attorney, shaking and fearful because of what you all had done to her? And after that interview without an attorney, you guys sent investigator Jake Roberts, a 35 or so year old male, who went in that room alone at the advocacy center and questioned her about what her attorney had just told her, a violation of her Fifth Amendment rights of attorney-client privilege, twice. And as if that weren't enough, he went back, Detective Jake Roberts, 2 more days, 2 separate times, and interrogated her again and again without an attorney, asking what her attorney had told her. The judge allowed a recording of her and her attorney's conversation. And when they were leaving the Children's Advocacy Center and got chased down by Sheriff Ford's guys, you can hear her saying, are we getting, or, you know, is this okay? Are you going to get in trouble? And Hoot says, I'm probably going to get arrested. That doesn't mean because I did something wrong. It means because these guys are crazy. And then Hoot Crawford, and this is what he's referring to, then Hoot Crawford says on his own recording, which belongs to the girl, by the way, it is her attorney-client privilege. That's her communication. Hoot Crawford says, if I'm wrong, I've thrown away a lot. And that's where the judge ended it. That's where the prosecutors ended it. But the very next sentence out of the girl's mouth was, you're not wrong. They cut that out. They stole her attorney-client privilege and played it and cut that out of context and edited. Watch him. Watch. Does he have the temperament? Watch.
Lawyer.
I'll tell you how.
Did she not have the right to have legal counsel?
She certainly did. But just like the evidence that showed at trial, when that young girl asked him.
That young girl is now 18, and she stood in front of the judge and said, you traumatize her. That young girl. He's acting like she's a little tiny girl. This is so misrepresented.
Can you do what this is? As if you went to trial, you heard this.
We did. We heard where you cut off where the girl said you're not wrong to her own attorney. You should take a shower and get the filth and grime off of you, you should be ashamed of listening to attorney-client privilege. That was not yours. It belonged to her.
Did.
The tape was played. He made a recording of the tape when that young girl asked
Young
him,
girl.
"Can you do this? Are you going to get in trouble?" He said, "No, I'm probably going to get arrested." Now, what does that tell me? He knew what he was doing.
No, it tells us that we know you guys will make wrongful arrest. That's what it means, Larry.
He was wrong and he was going to get in trouble. And the judge referenced that in the sentence.
Crooked Kelvin C. Wells. God, I hope this appeal goes through.
Wasn't that attorney-client privilege?
The judge said you knew what you were doing was wrong.
Was it attorney-client privilege, Larry?
Well, I think he took a video because he probably wanted to be on record and didn't think he was doing anything wrong. Was that not attorney-client privilege?
Ma'am, all I'm saying, thank you. All I'm saying is,
okay,
we are going to support law enforcement and the Department of Children and Family Services when someone interferes with that. If a parent had interfered like that, that parent would have been arrested. Okay, they tried to reason with Mr. Crawford. Okay.
You saw how Lieutenant Mathis tried to reason. Look at this guy. Does he have the temperament to be a prosecutor? A fair and decent one?
He would not listen to reason, even though he had been through that same procedure many, many times. Okay. Now, I'm not going to change your mind. I'm not going to try to change your mind.
I'm just asking.
I'm just telling you, as long as I'm in office, we are going to protect children.
Do you believe him? You know what? I really want to get out of here. And this bothers me more than I can tell you. And you know what bothers me as much as anything else? What bothers me as much as anything else is that there are not 50 people writing a bar complaint against him for many things, for talking about an open case, for violating her right to an attorney, for stealing her attorney-client privilege. It goes on and on. It goes on and on. But what mostly bothers me is Eric Garman. If you did your part and donated $100 to Eric Garman, if everybody donated money to, he'd have 500 grand. He'd have more signs. He'd have all the big commercials, and he would be our next top prosecutor. He'd be our next state attorney. I mean, who else is doing this?
After Mr. Basford got elected, he employed former state attorney Hess, paid him in the range, and you can correct me, somewhere around $145,000 a year to have one case, which he lost at least twice. I do not believe that's a good steward of our money.
That was a good effort and a good expenditure of money, and he didn't make anywhere close to $140,000. I think.
So I've been told, you talk about Hess like this, and the last time I said Glenn Hess's name, what was it, 2-3 days later? Sheriff Ford surrounded my home, searching for missing AirPods. 6 deputies and a Panama City police lieutenant. I've been told they're going to get you. Don't do it. It's too dangerous. It's so scary that you're afraid to donate to Eric Garman. Sometimes too afraid to like the show. How do we defend kids? This girl had the right to an attorney. Larry Basford needs to answer to the bar for this. Am I right or wrong? I'm right. And you know I'm right. So let's make it happen. Those of you who are in the position to do it in the legal field, actually, I know your ethics. I know your code of ethics. And if you're a judge, it's even worse. Because if you're a judge watching this, and you're aware of another judge or lawyer, officer of the court, violating ethics or judicial code of conduct, you are obligated. You must report it. So get to it.